Hesketh, Deputy Director of EuroCham Cambodia, and I'm honoured to open today's event on behalf of EuroCham. There'll be another speaker introducing on behalf of Raintree Cambodia. Today's event is actually the fifth in our 8-part series, our 8-part SME Exports series, and this is a collaboration with our partners at Nearirath Cambodia, our wonderful partners at Nearirath Cambodia, our project. And so to introduce today's events, if there is one thing we've really learned from our engagements with SMEs so far, it is that to begin to export is really hard. Cambodian companies must navigate complex regulations, understand relevant certifications, choose which logistics providers to use, and importantly, decide which sales channels they should utilize to access overseas markets. The primary objective of this series was therefore to raise awareness of the issues and offer tips that can support Cambodian companies improve their export performance, and to break down the opportunities and challenges SMEs may face when they start to begin their export journeys. And with that said, the objective of today's talk is to familiarise Cambodian companies with the e-commerce platforms available to them, both to access domestic customers as well as international export markets. So, as you can see from the slide behind me, and all credit to advisory firm Providence for compiling this slide, the Cambodian e-commerce ecosystem is vibrant and growing. In 2021, the value of e-commerce transactions in Cambodia was estimated to reach $222 million, and this is quite conservative. And on top of that, the figure is expected to grow at an average rate of 9% per year. There are now companies operating in almost every segment of e-commerce. And I'm proud to see many EuroCham members as well there, such as Smart Shop, Wing, ABA, Mango Tango, Food Panda, amongst them. The Cambodian government has, of course, recognised this growth potential. In 2019, enacting the e-commerce law, and in 2020, releasing the e-commerce strategy, which describes Cambodia as being on the cusp of an e-commerce revolution. And a revolution that is core to helping the country progress in its long-term vision of becoming an upper middle-income country by 2030. However, as can be also seen in this slide, the number of cross-border e-commerce players in Cambodia remains relatively small. And so far, they mostly focus on enabling foreign products to be sold in Cambodia. According to several SME interviews, it is not at all intuitive or easy for a Cambodian SME to list their product on an e-commerce platform that actually facilitates the sale of their Cambodian product abroad. And it is precisely for this reason that we've assembled today's expert panel. So for today's agenda, we'll be covering all bases, and we've assembled somewhat of a dream team of presenters to enable us to do this. We'll be hearing from legal expert Nearirath Sreng, sharing the latest updates on the implementation of Cambodia's e-commerce law. We'll be hearing from Sven Callebaut, one of Cambodia's leading e-commerce experts. He'll guide us on how to get started on e-commerce in Cambodia. We're joined by Wray, an international e-commerce consultant focused on the alignment of technologies and people, as I heard from him earlier. And he'll be focusing on the ideal customer journey that Cambodian SMEs should aim for when attracting and retaining customers. Finally, we'll really end with the practical details. DHL will be discussing how to get your product shipped abroad via an e-commerce platform. And last but certainly not least, we'll be hearing from a case study company successfully exporting Cambodian products abroad and using an interesting method to do this. So we have Miss Monika from Cambodia Knits. So I had to say myself that I'm very much looking forward to these talks. I'm very much looking forward to learning from these myself. And I hope those in the audience are today, are as well. So I really hope you enjoyed today's event, and it's now my great pleasure to introduce and welcome to the floor Guillaume Maltaverne from Arise Plus Cambodia project. So thank you very much, everyone.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for the first in-person SME Export Talk. Last year we did 4, but it was in a webinar format due to public gathering restriction. So my name is Guillaume, I am a member of the Arise Plus Cambodia team. I would like to say a few words about who we are and what we do. So the term Arise Plus stands for ASEAN Regional Integration. This is a program which is commissioned and co-financed by the EU and BMZ, which is the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. That's why you can see the EU flag and German flags at the bottom of the slides. And this is implemented by GIZ. If you wish to know more, we are present on different communication channels, and we will have a specific website. This program is about trade, but we are here today in the framework of the component which focusing on private sector. So we work with a list of 15 SMEs to provide technical assistance, and we work with business association to conduct some advocacy, export-related matters. But we are here today for Trading for events. So when you see this logo, keep in mind two things. It will be about export, and the content is designed for Cambodian SMEs. So this is very important for us to give the opportunity for Cambodian SMEs to share their expertise and their experience, the challenges they met, and how they can do business to export. The next event will be about certificate of origin, which is a documentation which is needed to export, and it will be in cooperation with the Ministry of Commerce. EuroCham will inform you when and where this event will take place. For each event, we publish a brochure. It provides a quick overview on the topic. It's designed to be reader-friendly, so I would say it will help you to know where to look at to find more information. So there are a series of key facts and infographics. They are available at the back of the room on the table. And in case they are no more in paper format, you can download it on our website, on the EuroCham website as well. Just would like to say a few words about today's topic. Actually, I was going through the literature, like doing a small desk review, and there is a report which is conducted by a consulting firm with Google on Southeast Asia and the e-economy. And what was interesting, it was the impact of COVID on e-commerce. So basically, internet penetration is very high in Southeast Asia, and it's increasing very fast. And as a result, because there was some severe restriction everywhere in Southeast Asia, many internet users has become digital consumer. So you can see there is like 60 million more people consuming online since 2020, and the latest data is from June 2021. So I believe for the 2022 report, this figure will be even higher, and it's only focusing on 6 Southeast Asian countries. So it shows basically COVID has accelerated an existing trend, which is to consume online. And this is my last slide. I find out as well, like each country has its own platforms. So there are 2 main regional platforms, which are Shopee and Lazada. But for instance, in Indonesia, there are many local platforms which are very, very popular, and same things will apply in Malaysia or Vietnam. So I would say for a specific destination market, sometimes there are specific e-commerce platforms. So the conclusion to this will be a strategy will be needed for SMEs that is wishing to export on an e-commerce. Specifically, it's a country in Southeast Asia. So that's why we're here today. I hope you will enjoy this event. So thank you very much for all the guest speakers to join us today, and I wish you all a very good event. Thank you.
Thank you, Guillaume, for your presentation. So next on the agenda item, may I please invite Ms. Nearirath Sreng, Deputy Head of Banking and Finance Practice Group of the FDL, to present her presentation on the e-commerce law, specifically on SME, on how and they need to know. Thank you.
Okay, good morning everyone. My name is Nearirath. I'm the Deputy Head Banking, Finance and Technology Practice Group at the FDL here in Cambodia. So a little bit of background about myself. I was with the support of ADB, I was the national consultant to assist the Ministry of Commerce, or in short as MOC, to prepare and to draft the e-commerce regulation, including the law, including the sub-decree, and also proposal. So today, giving to limited time, so today I have 4 agenda. The first one is the overview about the e-commerce in Cambodia. And 2 is the key compliance. What are the key compliance that you need to consider to comply with? And 3 is the sanctions, like what happens if you don't comply with those compliance requirements. And 4, what are the key actions that you should consider? So for the overview about the e-commerce, is that if you look at this, actually Cambodia is the last country to adopt the e-commerce regulations among the ASEAN. But at least we adopt it on time right before the COVID, so we are kind of lucky. And to prepare or to draft the law, we actually to comply with international regulations, for example, including the ASEAN Framework Agreement and also some UN instrument as well. So what is the e-commerce? So any commercial transaction that conduct via the electronic system are considered as e-commerce. And what is the difference between e-commerce and the traditional commerce? So, I mean, like back then, 100 years ago, there is no technology, there's no revolution, right? So, with the technology and with all these new things, everything now almost conduct with internet or electronic system. And so, what are the regulations that are applicable to e-commerce? So the regulations are not very different. So there are some special regulations that only applicable to the e-commerce, including, of course, the law on e-commerce itself. And second is the sub-degree on the e-commerce. And then, of course, there are some other broadcasts and also broadcast on payment service provider as well, or you can call us a fintech. And then there are some the joint broadcasts that talk about the fee and how you register with your business to get the license. And third is the digital signature. That's one of the important as well element in order to and then for the draft law on cybercrime is still draft law for the past 10 years, so the government has not done anything to improve that. And there's a new two law is the law on competition and also the law on consumer protection that also applicable to the e-commerce as well. Okay, so all those there's a new law that enable everyone to conduct business online, but there are some exceptions. There are 4 exceptions that you cannot actually conduct through internet or through electronic system. And the first one is any form of the POA. You cannot really do it or conduct it through the electronic system. You know, cannot scan or sign or anything. You have to do it in front of like in person. And second is any testament or any related to succession. You also cannot conduct it through the electronic system as well. And third is about the transfer or any contract for immovable property. You cannot do it as well. And also, last but not least, is about the transfer or sale or anything about the immovable property. So this is, and then, so who will be governed by the e-commerce? There's 2 categories under the law. They actually separate as 2. And the first one is the electronic commerce service provider, and second is the intermediary. So for those who provide services or product through electronic system to end user, is considered as the electronic service provider. And for those who actually exist between the electronic e-commerce service provider and the end user, like you are in between, and then it could consider as the intermediary. The next slide is about who are those intermediary. They could be the internet service provider. They could be the telecom service provider, or they could be the search engine, or they could be a marketplace, etc. So these are considered as an intermediary. So the second agenda is about what are the key compliance that you need to consider to comply with the e-commerce regulations. In order, I think the first one is important, is the license or permit from the MOC if you want to comply with it. And in order to get the permission or license, first of all, you need to obtain it's called an online service certificate from the MPTC. that before you actually go to the MOC to get the permit or license. That's the first step. And the second step, it depends on your type of business. If you are individual and you are sole proprietorship, then probably you try to get the permit letter from the MOC. And if you are a company, register with MOC as well, and you are then you need to get a license from the MOC. There are two types. It could be a permission letter, or it could be the license. It depends on the type of your organization. And for the second key agenda is the minimum information in the electronic commerce. So as you know that if you are going by thing or in the shop, right? If you go to the shop, you can actually touch it, you can see it, or you can smell it. So actually, you can access everything, in person, right? But if your service or your sell online, so it's difficult to, to make decision. So under the law, actually require the service provider or the intermediary to provide a certain or minimum information, at least this information, to allow the customer to make decision whether they want to use the service or to buy the product. So the first one is the first requirement for the minimum information is if your company actually have a name and then your trademark name are different, you need to provide both company name and both trademark as well. And then of course, because it's conducted online, it doesn't mean you don't need to provide address. Actually, you also need to provide your actual address, your business address. And then is the electronic means of contact. It could be email, phone number, and so on and so forth. And second category is to make sure that the way of your communication, it has to be really easy and also effective. Like for example, if they want to, your customer contacts you, then you should like in a reasonable way to communicate, or like in a short time or something. And then third is actually is the important, like I said, like if, for example, if you want to sell your phone, then of course you need to provide enough information about the product. It could be color, size, weight, and so on and so forth. That's the actual the product or service. And last but not least is the term condition that you need to include in your platform as well. And for the term and condition that you need to conclude must consist of this information. The first one is all the costs that are associated with your product or services. It could be including the actual product, the price of the actual product or services, and then other prices. It could be, if you provide you sell shoe or phone, then you need to provide the fee of shipping or delivery as well, and also like tax, how much customer need to pay the tax as well. And second is the method of payment. Is it cash on delivery, or you accept credit card, or you accept other way of payments? And third is related to cancellation, whether you allow them to cancel after some time after they place the order. And fourth is the termination. And fifth is if you allow them to terminate or exchange, what are those policies? So the purpose of this under this article or specific clause is to make sure that all this minimum information to allow the customer to have enough information whether they should buy or use the service or buy the product. That's the purpose. However, this specific requirement actually is not applicable to security and exchange sector and also insurance, because under the security and insurance, they have a separate regulation that require more specific than this. And another key compliance is the consumer protection. Although they are separate consumer protection law, but this is more specific on the e-commerce. So as you know that for consumer protection or for the consumer, because you are a service provider or you are intermediary, usually you hold a lot of information that's very important or sensitive, including the name, including address, including date of birth, and also including the credit card information as well, which is very sensitive and important. So the law makes sure that you need to have a reasonable or safeguard in order to protect your customer information or personal data. And you also should not interfere, including restrict access, copy, or leak, or you actually sell information, those sensitive information to other party without their consent. So it's quite short for the consumer protection. And last but not least is the unsolicited communication. So what is unsolicited communication? So we often receive like in email about the marketing, about this product, discount, and so on and so forth. Also on your phone as well. So we often get that. But if you notice, usually those e-brochure that sends through your email, they always have a button to unsubscribe or unwanted or unreceived. So under our Cambodian law as well, under Cambodian e-commerce also requires the service provider or anyone who send out all this e-brochure to allow the customer to reject it, like if they don't want to receive it in the future. So you need to consider that although you still want to do it, but you should allow them, customer, to not receiving it in the future if they don't want to. So the third agenda is a bit sensitive, I know. But if you don't comply with all these key compliance, so what are the sanctions, what are the penalties? So for this one, failing to comply with this key compliance or all the requirement under the e-commerce regulations, there will be a result as a written warning from the Ministry of Commerce or MOC. And then if you still not comply, they probably gonna cease your business operation or the specific transaction. And or worse, probably they're gonna suspend your business or suspend your transaction. And fourth, if you already received the license or you already get the permission letter, they probably gonna revoke it, like cancel your license. And then fourth, if you still not complying with those warning and with the MOC, probably worse, you're gonna have a jail time, imprisonment, or money fines. So the fourth agenda, the last one, is what are the key actions that probably you need to consider for your business in order to comply with this e-commerce regulations. So to ensure to comply with this new regulation that you should to consider, I think the first one is probably to apply for the mandatory license or permit. And second is to review your existing policy if you already have one, probably whether these policies are compliant with the e-commerce regulation. And the fourth is also to review the content on your website or platform or application, whether they meet the requirement of the minimum information that required under the e-commerce regulation. And last but not least is the e-brochure or e-marketing that you wanted to do to implement it, or you already have done it, but also consider to comply with the whether you should have the button where you allow the customer to unsubscribe or in the future, something like that. I think that's the end of my presentation. If you have any question, probably you could ask during the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nearirath, for your presentation. So next, please invite Mr. Sven Callebaut, International Trade Advisor at the Ministry of Commerce, and he's also the Director of Tradeworthy. Thank you, Sven.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks EuroCham and the Rice Press for the invitation extended to me to talk about how to move from offline to online, how to start export, and what are the different initiatives and programs, not offended, that can support SMEs to move from offline to online, online to sell on platform, and from selling on platform to selling across borders. So I'm indeed an advisor at the Ministry of Commerce, and I've been in Cambodia for 18 years, so a bit less than Denis, but still a long time. And my role is to advise government in Southeast Asia and the Pacific on their digital transformation, digital trade policies, and to make sure that businesses are able to take advantage of all these different laws, regulation, initiatives. So what I'm going to cover in this short presentation is a number of guides that were produced last year on how to move from offline to online in Cambodia in different sectors. This document is actually a printed document, and there were a number of copies sent to EuroCham, but it's also an online version, and you'll have the QR code here if you want to download. They are available in Khmer and in English. I will then say a few words on starting your export journey. So I should say that the topic of this talk today is very topical. A lot of businesses are trying to move online, and not only online, but trying to get new customers overseas. And one of the ways to do that at a lower cost is to use e-commerce marketplaces or websites. It's quite challenging, obviously, because for Cambodia, for instance, tourism, handicraft, were like captive markets. Tourists were coming to Cambodia, so businesses were able to sell directly to tourists. Now the tourists are not coming, they are back in their countries. So how do we make sure that we can continue to sell product, made in Cambodian products to this? So that's what I want to explain in the second part. And the third part is because I guess most of you are SMEs and most of you are not aware of the availability of grants, of support, the opportunities presented by donor funding initiative in Cambodia to move your business online or to move your business on cross-border marketplaces. So I'll say a few words on these initiatives that are ongoing in Cambodia, and I hope that some of you can avail of in the future. So first part, these good practice guides on moving online in Cambodia, they were released last year. They were funded by the Australian government. Most of the work we're doing is funded by the Australian government. The objective was to help businesses to pivot during the pandemic to make sure that they can still sell either in Cambodia or overseas in a number of sectors that have quite an appeal in Cambodia: groceries, consumer goods, transportation and travel, and food services. So if you've been here in the last 2 years, you've seen a number of new platforms, new players entering the markets. So our idea was not to promote these players, although they supported the formulation of this good practice guide, but to make sure that they have SMEs, they have service providers, formal or informal, I should not say that, but that was the reality in the last 2 years, selling online. So what we cover in, what's the objective is to be really, like, to use layman's language, to be very simple in how any business, formal or informal, single provider or larger companies can start moving online, move their business online. The few basic points like what platform to select, how to comply with laws and regulations, how to get payments, how to do digital marketing. So with the questions that SMEs that wanted to move online during the pandemic were asking themselves. So we have this information covered. I'm not going to go into detail of each practice guide, but we have all this detail covered for the food and grocery sector. So if you have a restaurant and you want to sell online, which platform are available in Cambodia, how to register, how to comply with laws and regulations, how to get paid from your customers, how deliveries can be organized by logistic providers, by the ride-sharing app also that move from passengers to goods. And we have also a number of partners who help us. So those are the players in Cambodia. We're happy to have EuroCham also promoting the use of these good practice guides. So I encourage you to either download, and I'll leave the QR code on the last slide, or ask colleagues from EuroCham to give you an access to the good practice guides in English and in Khmer. So those are some of the partners that help us. We try to be as comprehensive as possible, to have delivery companies, to have payment companies, to have service providers in the goods sector as well as in the services sector. So this is what it looks like. I think this QR code is too small, but you'll have another one later on. So I think the focus of this talk is on exports. It's export talks. If you want to know more about the journey of a business to move from offline to online, there is Monika, there is Chris, that will talk after me, and they can explain from a business perspective what it takes to register your business, to sell on marketplaces. But I want to say a few words about starting your export journey. There are many different options. It's either using social commerce, Facebook, Instagram, etc. Although for export it's a bit challenging. Having your own company e-store, or having access to marketplaces like Shopee, Etsy, etc. Depending on the product you want to sell, depending where you want to sell it. You have a number of different options. I hope Chris and Monika could cover part of that, or at least share your experience of which platform you're using. But more importantly, coming from a government perspective, what we are interested in, what I'm interested in here is in how to solve or to approach the different bottlenecks that your businesses will face when exporting. And it might seem simple to say, well, I have my businesses well established in Cambodia, I'm selling on Cambodian marketplaces. So the next step is really to sell on an international marketplaces like Alibaba or Amazon, etc. Unfortunately, that's not that simple, especially if you're located in Cambodia. So what Nearirath covered just before were the domestic regulations. So it's mostly what applies to providers in Cambodia, whether they want to sell in or out is not relevant. But in addition to all these, there are a number of regulations that will apply only to cross-border e-commerce. And here is just a few figures on what's the journey of selling online and what type of question you have to wonder between the fulfillment, the inventory, do you have the backend software to do inventory, to do stocking, whether your consumers will use desktop, laptop, smartphone, where do they go to sell to buy goods, how payment is processed, how the delivery is organized in the destination country. So there are numbers of areas for consideration that we are trying to work on at the Ministry of Commerce. We have just established, or we are establishing, a regulatory sandbox for e-commerce. So for those of you not familiar with regulatory sandbox, it's something used in fintech. It's kind of a closed loop where you can test a number of new regulations that, if successful, if impactful, could be then expanded to the entire ecosystem. And I'm going to share with you how we do that. But when you think about moving into cross-border e-commerce as a business, there are six areas of consideration that are listed here on the bottom right corner. From the market intelligence on the market you are targeting, digital marketing, payment, logistics, reverse logistics, returns, very important, and cyber law and regulatory considerations. So very quickly, market intelligence, and I guess Chris and Monika will cover that. You have first to understand your market, where you're going to export, where are your buyers, and once you have done that, you have to do your due diligence for identifying the appropriate e-commerce model, from selling with your own website, to using international marketplaces, to using Asian marketplaces. So there are a number of considerations that even before you start moving your business to e-commerce marketplaces, cross-border marketplaces, you have to take into consideration. Digital marketing, obviously. You're not selling the same way to Europeans, to Australians, to Americans. And for those of you who have a website in French, the way you're selling your website, your articles in France, in Canada, in Switzerland or Belgium will be different. So there are a number of things that you have to consider in terms of your digital marketing. Logistics, obviously, it's quite difficult for Cambodia businesses to export overseas because of the lack of, I would say, solutions for cross-border delivery. So you have to think in terms of who is going to deliver your goods in the destination market. Do you need a fulfillment center? So where you ship a big volume of goods from Cambodia to one place, let's say in Australia, and then wherever you have customer in Australia, the goods will be shipped from this fulfillment center and not from Cambodia, therefore reducing the cost of exports. Reverse logistics is very critical, and we don't realize this in Cambodia, but in Europe, more or less 30% of the goods, e-commerce goods, are actually returned by the consumers. And depending on the country, in some cases they don't even have to tell you why they're returning it, they just don't like it, it's broken, it's not the right color, it's not the right size, so it has to be shipped back. So sometimes, if you ship back a product to Cambodia, first of all, the shipment costs more than the actual product. Second, when it arrives at the Cambodian custom, it is treated as an import because it enters the territory, but actually it's not an import, it's a re-import that might become a re-export. So how this is dealt with the GDC by the customs is another nightmare. So you have to be ready to bear this cost, or at least understand what happens if your consumers, which is 30% in the case of the case in Europe, want to return your goods back to Cambodia. And sometimes the goods are time sensitive. I know, for instance, of an example of a company producing a wedding gown, wedding dress, for somebody in Europe who received the dress and it was not what they were expecting, or the size was not good, so they had to return it. And of course, by the time the dress was fixed in Cambodia, the wedding has already passed. So some of the goods are really time-sensitive goods. Cross-border payments, how are you going to get your money? Are you going to use credit card, debit card? So the simple answer we get here is, oh, I have ABA, so ABA will handle that for me. Unfortunately, no, ABA cannot handle that for you. So you have to understand what are the means of payment in the destination country before you can choose your payment provider. And there are payment integrators that can help you do that, but they are not coming automatically to mind when we think about a payment solution. Finally, cyber laws and regulatory considerations. Those items that Cyril mentioned, you can elevate them at an international level. So when you sell across borders, of course you have customs, fees and procedures in Cambodia, but also in the importing markets. But you have data privacy consideration, data protection consideration, online consumer protection considerations, and you have a number of what we call TBT, technical barriers to trade, SPS, sanitary and phytosanitary standards, and other technical standards you have to bear in mind. If you send perishable goods to across e-commerce marketplaces, there are a lot of different restrictions, type of product that the importing countries will impose on you. Sorry. If you export rice from Cambodia, the rice has to have a certain color, a certain size, a certain packaging, so you can't just send anything, otherwise your goods will be returned. They will not enter the customs territory of your destination country, they will be returned. So if you export perishable goods, fruit, vegetable, dried mango, for instance, you have to bear in mind the sanitary and phytosanitary requirements of the importing markets. Finally, third part of this presentation is what are the donor-led, donor-funded initiatives in Cambodia supporting cross-border e-commerce or export readiness. There are a number of them, and I'm sure Christine and Rise Plus have a number of activities supporting these SMEs. I just would like to mention two, which are very recent. The first one was launched last month. It's funded by the WEF, the World Economic Forum, implemented in Cambodia by Swiss Contact, and it's called Set for SMEs. It's basically a new online portal that would boost e-commerce, cross-border e-commerce from Cambodia, especially from women-led or women-owned businesses. They've just started, and I understand that Cambodia Women Entrepreneur Association is one of the partners, so if you are a member of the CWA, you can also approach them to get more information about this project, which will facilitate your move from domestic sales to cross-border sales. This project has two work streams. One is to support the modernizations of the link between the Cambodia Post and GDC, the custom, for the export of low-value shipments, like for e-commerce goods. And the second work stream is on the e-trail portal development and promotion. So it's actually the development of a portal that will help small businesses, especially women-owned businesses, to start selling across border online. Last but not least, our very own project in the MOC, which is called Go for EuroCham, which has a 3-year durations. And I've highlighted here in yellow those components in this project that support export through e-commerce marketplaces. So we have 4 components. The first one is the development of a cross-border e-commerce marketplace in Cambodia called CambodiaTrade.com. Some SMEs, I understand, in the room are already onboarded or in the process of being onboarded on this marketplace. We have a number of partnerships with DHL, for instance, with ABA, with Bacon, with iPay88 to help businesses that are selling made in Cambodian product only to sell on marketplace across borders. We also have a regulatory sandbox as part of this program, as I explained earlier, to try a number of regulations to promote cross-border e-commerce. We have a small grant program that is handled by UNDP. So the small grant program is basically a grant of up to $4,000 to move your businesses online on marketplaces, or to move your businesses from selling domestically to selling on cross-border e-commerce. So you can get up to $4,000, provided that 1, you are registered, 2, you are doing e-commerce, and 3, you are interested in exporting through cross-border marketplaces. And finally, we have a component that is helping Cambodia Post and GDC to talk to each other. Basically, to have a system that is recognized by importing markets in Europe, which would make the export of Cambodia low-value shipment easier to developed markets, to providing what you call advanced information on the type of goods, on the contents of the parcels, to the importing markets 48 hours before the parcel arrives in the destination market. So the marketplace is going to be launched this month domestically, and next month internationally. It's called CambodiaTrade.com, so you can just go on the site if you're interested to know more about the platform. You can also ask to be onboarded if you're an SME. It's free of charge to be onboarded on the marketplace. It doesn't mean that it's easy. It doesn't mean that it's simple, but it's free of charge. You can send an email to the help desk, or even call the marketplace. So the marketplace is developed and run by the Ministry of Commerce for the time being, but we are preparing an exit strategy to make sure that the marketplace continues beyond the project lifetime, which is ending in June 2023. So the marketplace will continue, possibly through a PPP with the private sector or the Chamber of Commerce, but it will not be run by the Ministry of Commerce itself. It's not the role of the ministry to run an e-commerce marketplace, although if you look at what happens in Thailand with ThaiTrade.com, or in Laos with Laos SME, those marketplaces, the cross-border e-commerce marketplaces, were started by government, and then later on the running of the platform was transferred to the private sector. This I've covered. So this is the small grant program I mentioned. This is run by UNDP. This is not run by MOC, but we are co-funding. And the second cohort will be announced, I think, in May or June. So you still have time to apply if you want to get access to this grant. So as promised, those are the 2 QR codes that you could scan if you're interested. The first one is this good practice guide on moving online in Cambodia, in Khmer and in English. And it's free of charge. You don't have to register. You don't have to put your email address. You just go there and download the one that you like. And if you are interested in the CambodiaTrade.com marketplace, you can scan the bottom bottom QR code, and it will take you to the marketplace so that you can just explore, or if you want to register and be onboarded, you'll have all the contact details. And with this, I thank you for your attention. I'll be happy to take any question later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Sven, for your presentation. So let me also remind that later on we will make the presentation available to all the attendees today. So next, I would like to invite Mr. Chris Wray, e-commerce UI designer and consultant, and also digital rain at World Bank, for his presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Wray, and for those who don't know me, I've been e-commerce consultant for about 12 years, arriving in Cambodia, presenting this to many people, and them saying around about 8 years ago, what's that? We don't have that here. You better find something else to do. And obviously these things have changed in the last couple of years, particularly with COVID, e-commerce now being really, the in area, as we'll see. I just wanted to thank my fellow presenters for lining this up for me. They've gone into a lot of the high-level details. I'm going to go into something a little more practical. Just a little bit about me. I'm an e-commerce consultant amongst anything, amongst 5 other roles, I think. I also work with some of the large institutions, such as World Bank, currently looking at supporting SMEs in digitalization. And I've been in technology for about 30 years, so when people talk about e-commerce as challenging, I find it super easy. I set up a website on Saturday, it was live on Sunday, and they made sales on Monday, so I'm one of the few, I think. So I'm going to go into some of the practical details. So a little bit about me. So I kind of work in this overlap, not only of the technology, but in the people who use it. So people like you, people like your customers. And I look at unusual things like building digital skills, user behavior, which is really, really interesting as humans. I do a lot of work with government and international development in terms of changing attitudes towards online. And I spend a lot of time with women in tech. So International Women's Day this week. Women have a very different way of viewing things to men. Really interesting when it comes to use of technology. In terms of technology itself, e-commerce is super easy for me. I spend a lot of time in MarTech, which is marketing technology, which will be the next thing for you when you launch e-commerce. Software development, crypto and blockchain, which I seem to have spoken a lot about this morning. Payment gateways, which I'll cover, and I spent many years in the telecoms industry, which of course linked to the internet. I myself am an exporter. I'm a consultant, but just looking at my clients that I deal with today, they're spread all over the globe from New Zealand to West Coast US. So I completely understand the details of everything I'm going to cover today. I completely understand your position as potential exporters. I'm going to go with some assumptions here. Talking to the audience, most of you are just moving into e-commerce platforms or just understanding them. Some of the more common ones, WordPress, Shopify, Squarespace, Magneto, and others, these are just generally available off the shelf, but they're not without their complications, I say, rather than challenges in terms of setting them up in ASEAN and particularly in Cambodia. I know that you all want to export. You probably want to be more successful, so I'm going to give you some of the information that I've learned from my clients in terms of some of the challenges that they've had and give you the shortcuts. So I'm just going to cover 10 slides. These are the lessons that my clients have learned over the last 10 years, or 10, 12 years or so. They seem really obvious. And we've talked about, compliance, and Sven's lined up about some of the, the obvious things in terms of getting your product out. But they're not so obvious. They've managed to supply me with work for a very, very long time. So I'm going to start with the first one. EAT and YMYL. This was something that Google introduced recently. They won't rank you in Google search unless you are an expert, you have authority, and people can trust you. So what's really, really important is to give your visitors that information within your website, relevant for any sector. The details in the box, it says, for those at the back, sorry, websites and pages should be created to help users. Totally obvious. Not everybody thinks about this when they put their content there. Websites and pages that are created with intent to harm users, deceive them, make money with no attempt to help, will or should receive the lowest PQ rating. More on this later. So essentially the PQ rating is Google will not rank you. People will not find you unless you consider the purpose of your website and the fact that you're helping your visitors. Something else, the YMYL stands for Your Money, Your Life. Again, some recent changes in the fact that if you're talking about potentially things like personal finance or medical or health, you need to be an authority in that field. It's not to say bloggers won't get a look in, but Google is now very aware of people can be misled. So it's protecting visitors in search data. Again, totally obvious. Language, I've seen people use Google Translate in order to move text from their own language to that of the visitor. Don't do it. Don't do it, it just doesn't work. Get a translator in, the quality is so much better. But the second point, the tone of voice, is that also, Sven mentioned it earlier, I think, in the terms of speak to your visitor in the way that they expect to be spoken to. So if you're talking about snowboarding, for example, you'll have a very different language than if you're talking about how to address health issues. Use the same language, it fits in much better with your niche and your audience. Search, and I'm not talking about Google search here, I'm talking about the little magnifying glass that appears generally in the top right-hand corner of most websites. Has anybody ever used it? Your visitors do. If they can't find what they're looking for very, very quickly, they'll be gone. What's really interesting is just put random words into your own search and then take a look at the results that come up, because those test pages that you made, the fake posts that you had when you started your website, they will all show up. So it's a little exercise for you to do and take away. But interestingly, don't tell visitors about things that you don't have, because it will affect your search results, and again, they'll be gone. And most users, if they're putting in keywords for what's known as search intent, I intend to do something once I have found it, if they can't buy it now, they're not interested, they'll be gone. For those of you selling products, I sell services, but it's the same, is they want to know everything. They want to know absolutely everything about your product. Chairs, tables, we bought some for our office. I want to know how big it is, I want to know what color it is, I want to know whether it folds up, I want to know when you can deliver it, I want to know absolutely everything about your product. It's really hard work to write good product and service descriptions, but spend the time on it, because your customer will reward you when they find exactly what they're looking for. But also, for those people selling more complex products or complex services, tell the visitor what else they'll need. So how do I fit it? How much cable do I need? What about all the extras that go with it? You know, for those more complex products and services, they want to know that too. And it's also an opportunity for you to sell those additional items, those additional services. This is one of my favorites. 2 clicks is one too many. You know, we talk about swiping. I've done a lot of work in watching people use websites and applications, and it's age-related. People like me will start at the top and work down to the bottom. People like my children will take a look at the top, immediately scroll to the bottom, come back up again to the middle, then go to the top, and then go back down again. A really interesting behavior as to our age and what it is that we're looking for. And remember, most people's attention span is tiny. It's now about 8 seconds, I think it is. So make sure that getting to the information, 3 clicks is ideal from the home page to get to where you want. 1 quick click is best, and we talk about, you know, the information that you're asking your customer for. Probably the worst example of these are the development agencies and their job applications. They ask you for the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, and most people give up. Amazon got this right with their one-click purchase. Yeah, so try and make it as easy as possible. Checking out is, so if you think about it, this is probably the most important step for most people. I've made a decision, I found what I'm looking for, I just want to buy it. Again, back to this clicks thing, don't put anything else in your checkout process. Give them plenty of options for payment, make it easy for them, delivery, we've talked about, but avoid distraction. There used to be the temptation of, oh, if you're interested in this, you might be interested in that. And what happens is, people are indeed interested in that, they go look at it, and they forget why they arrived on the website, and then they're gone. So keep your checkout process as clean and as smooth as possible, and don't put any shiny objects to distract your visitor from getting to the end. This is probably the number one question that I get as a consultant is, I always ask that question, where do you want the funds to go? And this is the same for international businesses, local businesses. We've talked about ABA locally, but if you're exporting, you're using multiple currencies, you're using different service providers dependent on the region, the costs can be significant, not only in the payment method and the payment gateway that you use, but secondly, in transferring that money. If you want it to come back to Cambodia, and you're taking payment in euros and it's going into a bank account in Paris, for example, there's a lot of steps you've got to jump through to get it back again. So choosing the right payment gateway is super, super important. Even cash on delivery isn't without its challenges. You still need to send someone with the money. It's real cash. If it's low cost, it's less of a risk. If it's big cost, maybe neither the driver nor the goods nor the money will come back again. And then banking and transfer fees, they vary from as little as 1 point something percent. I've seen 12% in terms of costs. It's really, really super high. And you think about your customer, you know it's expensive. They know it's expensive too. Tell them that it's expensive and tell them why. Because we need to know that information, make it transparent to them, they will understand. Allow them to make that decision. Don't hide it until the end and they see it in the receipt, and we'll talk about receipts shortly. This is another one that Sven mentioned. It's becoming more of an issue. It's, if you're selling just a small number of goods or you're selling virtual products, not an issue. But people really need inventory management systems, and there aren't that many local systems here. I'm looking after a new startup that has just launched theirs this week. But you need to remember that when they buy it online, they're expecting to receive it. And so when you walk into your warehouse or you look at your shelves, you need that black t-shirt in a V-neck in size medium to be there. If you look at the shelf and you've got large, and you've only got large, that's one very upset customer. So e-commerce isn't just e-commerce on its own, you have to manage the goods and or services that go with it. Don't show things to your customers that you don't have, because you're essentially just wasting your time, and they'll remember that. Think about back orders though, so if you do have stock and you have an inventory management system and you know it's coming in, let them know it'll be arriving on the 12th of March, and they can do a pre-order. As you grow, I've seen Facebook sellers in rooms where you can hardly see the floor because they have so many goods. Once you get to volume, an inventory management system is an absolute must. I've seen lots of people still using spreadsheets. It doesn't work. This is a really interesting one, and again, one that's super, super obvious. Just sending a receipt. There are country-specific requirements. There are details about order numbers. I know in Hong Kong, for example, I spent a couple of days looking at a client's receipting system because they didn't have consecutive numbers. And that was a real issue for the taxation department because they wanted to know where the missing ones were. So just think about, again, it's only a number, theoretically it's sequential. Sometimes it isn't. People want to know about their terms and conditions, so ensure that they've got them, and the receipt is a good place to put them, to remind them. Returns policy, Sven also touched on, you know, what are the conditions here, how do I get in touch with you, etc., etc. Receipts are super good for this. But remember also that consumers have different needs. Some people want it in a PDF, some people want to print it, some people want it in a confirmation email within a few seconds. Give them the options. It's all relatively simple, relatively doable, super, super, super important. And then the last point of the 10 tips, 12 years squashed into a few minutes. I make money while I sleep. I've almost completely automated my consulting. You can go on my website now, you can book some time with me. It will get put in my calendar, it will get put in your calendar. I don't do anything. So yesterday morning I woke up, I had 2 clients. They just appeared out of the internet. It does work, but remember we're all human. Yeah? So think about, people make mistakes. Oh, I'm really sorry, I put 2,000 of those items in instead of 20. It happens. When you automate, think about the potential for human error because you'll need to cover for it. So be prepared for it. You know, it's a computer, the computer says no, but actually it's just a mistake. When you get to volume, automate it. You know, when it works, it's absolutely superb, and you do indeed make money while you sleep. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for your presentation. So I think before we head on to the next presentation, let's have a short 5 to 10 minutes breaks, and then grab a coffee, and then you can come back and sit down, and then we'll start on the next session very soon. Thank you.
Personally, I'm very excited to be here, as this is my first time as part of the SME Export Talk. Hopefully by the end of this session, I could share with you some insight with regards to e-commerce and exporting SME. Within the 15-minute presentation, I will be covering four objectives. First, I will briefly introduce all of you to DHL Express, what we do. Second, I will cover the 5 effective steps for SME or businesses to get your product overseas. And then third one, I will also cover what we, DHL, currently offer to our e-commerce customer as a value proposition. Last but not least, basically just a summary of how you could kickstart your internationalization journey with DHL Express, the details of how you could open a corporate account and what are the shipment process, etc. Yeah. So allow me to begin very briefly. DHL is an international express company. We focus primarily on import and export of time-sensitive shipment. So we do cross-border delivery. In terms of our capability, So in terms of our capability, we do custom clearance on a daily basis. We have our own dedicated charter flight, which means that we could handle volume for our customer. We have 2 regional hubs in Asia Pacific. Across Cambodia, we have 2 service centers and 3 service points. We are also certified by TAPA, which means that we adhere to a certain industry standard. We have optimal transit time as compared to competitors. And we are the only companies that have a certified international specialist, which means that we go through global standards of training for all of our employees. So for DHL Express, we have been actively involved in the e-commerce for well over 5 years. So I will be sharing based on those accumulated experience. So there are from the perspective of a logistic provider, there are 5 effective steps for businesses or SME to follow to formulate a simple yet effective e-commerce strategy. So there are 5 steps. Step 1 is to understand the customer journey. Step 2 is to know the market. Step 3 is to choose the right channel. Step 4, to check the health of your online store. And then step 5, of course, to get a reliable partners. So I will go through in details of each of these steps. The first step is to understand the customer journey. So as you could see from the graph in the middle here, there are two important loops. One is the discovery and information loop, and then another one is the purchase and fulfillment loop. So I will not go into details on the discovery and information as the previous speaker already covered some of that. But equally important is the purchase and fulfillment loop. So the online journey of your customer does not end when they decided to place a purchase. Rather, they go through a couple more touch points, like international payment option, as what the previous speaker also mentioned. But also, they have to decide and choose the international delivery option that they would like. So if they have a positive experience from those touch points, then of course businesses can yield loyalty. And when you can obtain customer loyalty in the long term, you can ensure a sustainable revenue stream for your business. So here, there's a data here, 87% of consumers tend to return after they enjoy a good customer experience, a good delivery experience. Second step is knowing your market. Of course, before you decide to internationalize or get your product to an international market, you have to first do a preliminary research on the country that you are selling to. So what we do is we have what we call country guide. Country guide is a source of information where you could look into doing your research prior to sending your product there. Let's say, for example, that you are making wedding dress, as what the last speaker mentioned. You want to expand your market and sell to the US, which you haven't done so. Of course, you need to study the market of the United States. So you need to know certain information such as de minimis value. What is the de minimis value of the United States custom? What are the documentation that are required in order for me to send there? What are the consumer behavior? What are the other key information? So in this country guide, it's available publicly. I can share with all of you if you're interested. Contain key information, as I mentioned, custom-related information. For example, like the minimum value in the US has been increased from $200 to $800, so anything below that could be cleared upon arrival quickly. And then there's also other information regarding prohibited or restricted commodity, so you could benchmark whether the product that you are sending is within the allowance of the US custom or not. So we do have this guide for approximately 20 guides, mostly for advanced economies like the US, Australia, Japan, China, etc. So if you're interested, please let me know. Then I can show you. I have both printed copies as well as soft copy for your reference. Yes. So of course, when you embark your e-commerce journey, you have to decide whether you want to have your own website. So if you want to have your own website, there's a couple of platforms that are available for you to choose from, including Shopify, WooCommerce, Magento. These are quite common for Cambodian businesses. Otherwise, you could also embark on your own platform. Let's say you want to develop your own marketplace, or you want to place your product in a already existing e-marketplace. That is also possible. So for either option, for DHL, we do support all customer or businesses on IT integration. So if you say that you wish to pursue, you wish to create your own website on Shopify, then for DHL we have what we call DHL Express Commerce. It's basically a plugin for your business platform on Shopify. So it's easy integration. It could take 1 to 2 days only. So for us, as from a logistic provider perspective, in order for your business to be successful, we normally advise on 3 key components. Your website should be fast, flexible, and accessible. So in terms of fast, your website should clearly outline or mention whether or not you are selling internationally. Also, do you offer express option when they check out the product? Does the express option is available or not? Do you offer convenient shipping option for your customers? So they need to know all of that. In terms of flexibility, you also need to inform your website visitor or your customer whether your shipping charge is reasonable or not, and what is the charge. It has to be transparent. Do you offer duties and taxes, or what we call DTP option? This means that once the consumer buy the product arrive at their country, it has to go through customs. Do they need to pay the duty and taxes, or are you paying on their behalf or not? Another aspect is, can you customize delivery option? As you know, online sellers right now are quite demanding. They're always on. So they're busy, so they need to be able to have this flexibility of when they can choose to receive their shipment. Because some of them are working people, so during the daytime they have to work, and usually the delivery time is during the daytime. So are they able to customize when they can get or receive the shipment by themselves or not? In terms of accessibility, yes, this is what Sven mentioned about reverse logistic return. Do you offer return? So when you're sending your shipment to the customer have an issue with it, do they have the option to return the shipment back to the shipper or not? And if you do opt in for this return return policy, then who is paying for this shipment is also should be under consideration. So in terms of language, currency conversion, as well as localized payment option, these are all equally important for you to consider on your website. And last but not least is the status of your delivery. Do you have can you proactively inform your customer on the status of your shipment or not? I think all of these aspects are very important and can be on your website, and your website stand to benefit. As Chris mentioned, you can an online website can make you money while you sleep. So it's always on. This information can be there to inform your customer when they visit your website. Last but not least, of course, to get reliable partners in terms of logistic, a partner that could have a worldwide shipping presence, and then also have capability to assist you in custom clearance, as well as having the option whether or not you can opt in for easy and express return. These are very important in a logistic partners. Okay, so moving further, this is more on the value proposition that we as a company currently offer to our current e-commerce customer. So once the website is live and online, and we usually offer beyond the consultation of logistic, we also help customer to integrate their system, their website with our system. So IT integration is something that we do extra mile for our customer. So no matter whether you are on Magento, WooCommerce, or Shopify, or you have your own platform or even application, mobile application, we are there to help you. We could offer plugin and also API to work with your developers, as we have been done in the past 4 or 5 years already. So why is integration important? First, it can improve your customer experience. They can see clearly there's visibility and transparency in shipping rate. So when they check out, they want to pay, there's information on how much you are charging for shipping rate is there. You could also allow multiple delivery options. So we have a wide varieties of service that are available, so you could choose from there as well. And more importantly is your business could improve the back-end process. So you do not need to manually create shipping label. Once you are integrated with our system, customer place their order, they key in all their information, is already auto-populated, and then the shipping label will be automatically available on the platform. Yeah, so also you could automate communication with customer because you are selling online. Even though you are sleeping, there are also a support for you to help you proactively inform your customer on the status of their shipment. Yeah. Another solution that we help customer to be proactive when deciding to ship abroad is custom clearance and custom information. Because as a business as an exporting SME, you also need to understand the custom information locally as well as the international market that you want to expand to. So we have a platform called Trade Automation Services, or in short we call TAS. It's publicly available as well. Here you log into this platform, you could key in the commodity code, the HS code of the product that you're selling. And then you can select the country that you wish to send to. In return, it will tell you some of the information on documentation. What are the documents that are required for your commodity to be shipped there? Second thing, and more importantly, is the tariff rate. So if your shipment, let's say you are sending a shirt of $100 to the US, then it's beneath the de minimis value, then there will be no duty and taxes there. Otherwise, if you're setting some sort of a middleweight shipment or anything higher than 30 kilogram or upward than that, then you need to check the tariff rate. And then this platform will help you to plan accordingly when it comes to sending your shipment. Yes, so how can you start to ship internationally, and how can you start to ship internationally with DHL? So first thing is you need to open an account. Why do you need to open a corporate account? Once you open a corporate account, you can enjoy special discounted rate as opposed to, as I have some conversation this morning with colleagues here, they mentioned that the rate is quite expensive. However, if you do open an account with us under e-commerce account, you can enjoy a quite special rate because we customize it to fit with our the commodities under the context of Cambodian businesses here. In addition to discounted rate, you could also get credit term 14 to 30 days to help you manage your cash flow of the business. In addition to that, you can get IT, as I mentioned, IT and customer service, as well as sales support for your account. And then we have door-to-door service. So door-to-door service will alleviate some of the issue that you have. Once you finish preparing your product, you request pick up. We go to your business premise to pick up the shipment, and then we process it, bring it back to our warehouse, uplift it, send it to the destination, and then deliver it at your consumer doorstep. So it's a door-to-door service. Once you have an account, you will start to send your shipment. Then we have two compulsory documents. As you may know, one is air bill, which is on the left-hand side, and then another one is what we call commercial invoice on the right-hand side. So these are the two compulsory documents if you wish to send to abroad. Once you get this document, you request pick up. Our courier will go to your business premise, check the document, check the parcel. If everything is aligned, then we will bring it back and then uplift it and send it to your consumer at your doorstep. Yeah. So that is very briefly the process and the recommendation that we make usually to exporting SME. If you have questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sousachak, for your presentation. So next, last but most importantly, of course, Ms. Monika. She's from Cambodian NIF and also from BEP and Bongo company. She will be sharing a case study on how she's using the e-commerce platform for export. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. Just my presentation may be shorter because the previous speakers have cannibalized most of what I was going to say. But I am the only one with props. And my presentation will be a bit more colorful. I press which button?
The next one.
Okay. Yeah, so that's me. I am the Chief Knitting Officer of Cambodia Knits, which is I'll tell you about more in the presentation. And I'm also the CEO of BB and Bongo, a separate company. Again, I will explain why we have these two companies, and then also kind of try to tie in my presentation many of the things that we heard about from the presenters before. So I'll just start to explain to you a little bit about what we do and why we do. The big problem that we have recognized is that toys are the most plastic-intensive industry in the world, with 90% of them being made of non-recyclable plastic. And our solution to this is, 80% of toys are made in factories with poor or non-existent conditions. And our solution to this is high-quality, eco-friendly toys focused on play-based learning that are ethically handmade by women in Cambodia. I think some of you may have already met our brand before. If you know about us, raise your hand. If you've raised your hand, I have a prize for you at the end of this presentation. I have something to give to you. So we started here many years ago as a small passion project, and I started Cambodia Knits as a social enterprise when I learned that there was a thing called social enterprise and that there was a way to create impact for people through employment. And that business wasn't only about making money and about making profit. So I started with a handful of women in my living room. We developed a line of products together, and over time we grew, and then it demanded to become an actual business, which is what we have done. With COVID hitting in 2020 and all of our local sales dropping to practically nothing, maybe about 97% loss of local sales, we really wanted to continue the work that we do, especially we knew with COVID happening that the women that create the products for us were going to need an income. So I was quite keen to find a way to keep the business going, and I knew that at that time I had to go global. So even during the COVID pandemic, I decided to set up another business, and this with a business partner who's also a fellow Canadian here. And we set up BB and Bongo. So a good question is, why do you run two businesses? I ask myself this every day. It's a huge headache, and I don't recommend it to anyone. I also don't recommend getting into the toy industry for anyone, because the compliance and the safety issues are an absolute nightmare. So in looking to reach the global e-commerce market, we recognized that we needed to separate the two companies into the production and the sales and marketing. Cambodia Knits as a brand wasn't going to make it on the global market for many different reasons, and so we decided to develop a new brand called BB and Bongo to delight as well as to sell. The two stories needed to be separated, and then what we do with Cambodia Knits in fair trade ethical production is very different from what we do with BB and Bongo and trying to sell overseas. So, and our registrations are different. So BB and Bongo is registered as a company in Singapore, and Cambodia Knits is registered here in Cambodia. Another nightmare. I don't recommend it for anyone, but you will also see that aside from a strategic reason why we did this, there were practical reasons why it was better for us to separate the two. What we've learned, and some of this has already been covered, knowing your customer, previous presenters have already mentioned this, you need to know who your customers are, their needs, their pain points. There's lots of different tools for how to do this. Definitely focus on one market at a time, unless you have a huge team behind you who can look at all the different markets and all their different platforms, and especially for the toy industry, every single country has its own regulations for toy safety, which is a very expensive and also a very complicated thing to do. As again, automation, huge. I will explain later on in a slide how we automate our e-commerce sales. Be clear about shipping terms, I don't need to say more about that. And something that Chris didn't mention that surprised me a bit was SEO, but search engine optimization. you need to learn how to work with the Google beast. He mentioned a little bit about this, and some businesses think, oh, we'll do that later, we'll set up our website, and then we'll think about SEO. It's too technical, it's too complicated. I think you need to do this from the beginning. It's also tied to knowing your customer and your market, so you know your search engine keywords and how to plug them into your product pages and URLs and everything. So, and shipping costs, what we have learned over the years, will absolutely make or break a sale. You need to be very clear with your customer about what your costs are. Where possible, if you can include the cost of shipping in your price, that's a great offer, or at least offer a flat rate. Your customers don't want to be confused by, oh, what is this weight and what's this box size and where is it going and I'm located here, but you're shipping, what's going on? They just want to know and they want to make it easy. You want to make it easy for them. So again, things that we have learned and we've now applied to our e-commerce platforms is customer expectations. And I think these are across the world. So whichever market you're working on, they're going to want a known, trusted payment gateway. So like here we have PayPay, Wing, ABA. We all know how they work. We all have access to them. We know them, we trust them, we use them easily. Our main target market right now is the US, and in the US, PayPal and Stripe, everybody is familiar with how to use these. And now GPay and Apple Pay are becoming more and more popular. And we are able to offer these on our website. And then the other thing is that they want fast, reliable, and cheap shipping. Part of this is because of Amazon around the world and Amazon Prime. Also, if you look at Lazada and Shopee and some of these other platforms, they often offer free shipping. So if at the checkout, your shipping cost is suddenly going to add another $20, $30, $40, $50 to the cost of their order, they're going to run. They're used to shipping by Amazon, which is very small amounts or reasonable amounts and fast and reliable. Oh, and this is a commercial break. These are one of the products that we make. If you have young children in their preschool age, this is a great tool for learning numbers and counting and sorting colors. Okay, back to my presentation. So the way we solve a lot of our problems is to use a fulfillment center in the United States. So we send things in bulk and house them in a warehouse that looks something like this. This is a stock image. And then they are connected to DHL e-commerce in the United States, which is fabulous. I'll explain a bit more on the next slide. We're also looking at regional sales in Singapore and in Japan. And now in both those countries, we're looking at fulfillment centers and companies that can help with our fulfillment. So this is how the fulfillment process, this is the very technical kind of boring step-by-step detail, but I think it gives you a lot of ideas about what you would need to do to set up if you wanted to do global e-commerce. So we start with our customer who comes to our website, which we try as much as possible to be delightful and easy. Only a couple of clicks or maybe one click to buy, I hope. Chris, you can tell me later. And we hope that they enjoy our website so much and our products that they place an order. Now what happens when they place an order on our website is PayPal or Stripe, whichever payment platform they decide to use, talks to our website. Again, we are not involved in this at all, and verifies the payment, clarifies the payment, it goes through, we get the money into these two platforms. At the same time, our website talks to our accounting program, which is called Xero. I don't know if anybody knows Xero? Yeah, it's a terrible name for an accounting platform, I think. Xero, zero money in my account. But yeah, so it talks to them and it automatically creates an invoice in our accounting system. So I don't need to go in and type in an invoice with the name of the address and all of these other details. It does it for me automatically. And then PayPal and Stripe also communicate with Xero. They're integrated. PayPal and Stripe are integrated with our bank in Singapore. And then the bank and Xero also talk to each other. So all of my finance stuff related to a single sale is very easily all connected and very easy to see. Now, PayPal and Stripe are not available in Cambodia. So this is another big incentive for us to register in Singapore because OCBC Bank and all the banks in Singapore will connect to PayPal and Stripe. And then also send directly to the bank. I'm hoping a bank here will eventually connect to PayPal, but at this point, You can pay with PayPal, but you cannot, as a business, receive money from PayPal or Stripe. And of course, our customers in North America, they want to use PayPal. So at the same time as this order is placed, our fulfillment center gets the information about what the customer wants. They create the package, and they also create a tracking number and a label. So again, automation, I have nothing to do with this. I don't have to type in anything or go to the post office. Then this tracking number is sent to our website, and then it's automatically sent to the client. So our client is very happy. They've gotten their payment information, they've placed their order with a click, and then within a couple of days, they receive a tracking number from DHL, and then they get their package. This whole thing can take maybe 3 to 5 days if they're within the United States. And when that happens, we often get a 3-star rating. So it's a very great process. The only thing I do need to step in, or someone on my team needs to step in, is the reconciliation with the bank. But that's just part of your monthly accounting processing. So these are our shipping rates from Cambodia, and this is another reason why we really had to look for shipping and for fulfillment outside. There's a lot of numbers here, so I'm not going to ask you to look at all the different zones and things. This is our special rate card from DHL, and then this is the rate card from EMS, the 2 people we have shipped with. So to ship one of our sleepy animals, which is about 300 grams in a box, to Singapore, which is our closest target market, is anywhere from $37 to $54. This item costs $25 on our local website, and it costs $44 on our global website. And then to send it to EMS is $26.25. Also important to note for those of you who do not do shipping from Cambodia, this is not the rate that you actually pay. The rate on the rate card is not what you pay. There will be a fuel surcharge, which is going up now, and there's also tax and emergency surcharge, and sometimes there's a packing surcharge, and sometimes there's a I breathed on the box surcharge. There's lots of surcharges added, and this is not the price that you will pay in the end. And then if we look at US again, we don't have many customers who would be willing to pay this kind of money to receive our product. Maybe if you're shipping a beautiful wedding dress that's worth $2,000 and you can fit into like the 3 kilogram category, you absolutely should be using this kind of very tracked, very good shipping service. But for small products, if you want to sell in volume and quantity, it's just not gonna work. Oh, delightful product some more, if anyone has a preschooler. Our stacking balls are a very popular product, fully safety tested. So then these are our shipping rates from within the US, and without getting into the details of the numbers, you could immediately see the difference in pricing. So our pricing, once we get our product to the US, this is what we can charge to our customer. So it's a fraction of the cost. And even if we count in, well, not even if we count in, we must count in the cost of shipping in bulk to the US. It's still far, far cheaper. It's also still cheaper for us to ship from here to the US and from the US to Singapore. Because shipping this one product from the US to Singapore is about $10.45 from the US compared to $50 from Cambodia. DHL mentioned they have some special rates, so I'd love to see them if they get lower than that. Because if they get lower than that, I would much be happier shipping from here and not dealing with the export and the import and the other export and then importing again. So we've started looking at regional rates as well. I can't tell you too much about them, but I am happy to share with any other SMEs in this space what we learned. So these are just some of the fulfillment centers we've been talking to in Malaysia, Thailand, and Singapore. And that's just to give you an idea of their rates. So the rate for shipping, once your products are in Malaysia to Malaysia, are about $1 to $2 per kilo. It's the same as getting the rates that we have here in Cambodia. Like our rates with Yam24 or Grab or all the other local deliveries are phenomenally cheap. So if you have the option of paying $40 to receive some salt from Cambodia versus paying $2 to buy that salt because it's already in Malaysia, you're gonna probably pay the lower price. So we still have a lot of challenges as an SME, some of them related to e-commerce, some of them just related to existing. So namely, sending to the US is still expensive. We're still using small packages. We haven't yet scaled to where we want to scale. So we are looking for investment to be able to send in bulk and lower our shipping rates even more. This isn't about local compliance, but local and global compliance for an SME is very difficult. It's very complicated. It takes up a lot of time and sleepless nights. And getting customers to our site is still difficult for us. Again, just setting up a website, people aren't just going to come and buy from you. There's a lot of work on SEO and advertising and marketing. And then for us, with a key target to create jobs in Cambodia, managing the growth of our sales compared to the growth of production, it's always a bit of a chicken and egg scenario. Do we boost production, but then we can't sell it? Do we boost sales, but then we don't have stuff? And yeah, so some recommendations. I think and I think this is covered again by people like Sven and Chris who have much more experience than me, but regional platforms like Lazada or Shopee, learn how to list on those, and then maybe try to get your stuff to Malaysia or to Singapore or somewhere else so that you can fulfill it locally in that country. And you have to have a good margin. Again, there are so many fees, whether it's PayPal or if you use ABA Gateway or whatever else, there's going to be fees at every single step of the way. So you need to have room for margin, you need to have margin to cover all of these fees. Where you can, include the shipping cost of the product. This will make your customer very happy. We saw sales of our sleepy animals go up a lot in the US when we just said, it's just $44. You're in the US, that's just what you're gonna pay. We don't add any shipping costs at the end, but if you're shipping to Canada, it's $10. If you're shipping to Europe, it's $15. And our sales are a lot higher than the customer coming to the checkout and being like, oh, whoops, it's $27. I don't wanna do that anymore. Yeah, you want one? We have some of our products on display in the back. As an owner of an SME, I have to do sales at any possible time that I can. We do have a discount code for you at the back as well. You get 15% off. You can even try using our e-commerce platform. And yeah, and that's for me. I hope that was helpful, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Monika. So a very inspiring presentation. So next, and also what the audience are waiting for on the panel discussion. So I invite my colleagues, Toms, our moderator for the session. Welcomes again Monika to be part of the panels, and of course Ms. Nearirath from the FDL, Sreng, Chris, and also Mr. Sousachak from the DHL.
Yes, panelist speak comes to there. Perfect. So thank you everybody for your patience so far, and really from these presentations so far, I just wish I could download the brains of some of our speakers here at the moment, because it was definitely aid in project work, and I think aid in many things. And if we could export that to other Cambodian SMEs, we would be in a very good position. I was very impressed there, Chris, especially by your confidence. You're the first person I've ever heard to say e-commerce is easy for me. So really great to have you on the panel for this. So actually, for today's panel, my moderation is relatively easy. We'll keep this to around 20 minutes, and really I want this to be just an opportunity for the audience to ask any burning questions they may have. If we have a shy audience, I have my own questions that I'll ask the panelists, but really I just open up with, were there any burning questions we had from the audience members today? If you do have a question, please address who you would like that question to be answered by. Okay, we have one over here.
Hello, my name is Victor. Based on the presentation of DHL and mentioning that the US allows shipments of less than 800 dollars to go out without duty and VAT. Can you explain the situation in Europe? Because I'm from the Netherlands, and I think our the minimus is lower to below 50 euros, and then even duty has to be paid. And maybe as a personal example, as a customer, I can say that I once bought a car part in the US for $26, and then it was sent to the Netherlands, and then I had to pay, I think, 4 euros in tax or 5 euros, plus a fee of 20 euros to be allowed to pay the tax. But I really needed the car part, so I just took the loss and paid also the 20 euros for the processing fee of the Dutch competitor of DHL or DHL, but in Europe, DHL and their colleagues, they charge consumers a processing fee for paying this tax and duty. So you might pay 5 or 10 euros in tax, but the DHL charges you 20 to process it for you. But maybe interesting more, I mean, how does it work with the EU de minimis, and was DHL not able to lobby that it will also be 800 euros?
Okay, thank you for your question. So for any destination market you are sending to worldwide, they have different regulation and custom requirement. For the US, as we mentioned, the de minimis is quite high, so they're quite open for B2C space. However, for Europe, the de minimis value is much lower. And the fact that you have to pay processing fee, I think, is because the custom clearance process, once your shipment arrives, someone needs to clear it for you. So you could nominate a broker on your own, or you could nominate DHL to act on your behalf. So by nominating a broker to clear on your behalf, will incur some sort of fee. For the EU currently, because of some of the changes in regulation right now, the de minimis value has been erased. I think it's much lower now. So all shipments are subject to duty and taxes for Europe.
And one small follow-up. Is there any difference between EU member states? I think it should not be, because in your slide you mentioned different markets, but you didn't say EU, but you said France and different countries. Of course, United Kingdom now is different. But I hope, at least for the people here, that all these countries are market EU, and they don't have to handle France, Germany, Netherlands.
Yeah. So for EU, because of the significant changes that we saw last year, we have updated regulatory information. If you're sending your product to EU, you can consult with us. We have different pack for you. The market insight that I just showed you, it was completed in somewhere around 2019, and gradually we added a bit of information. But for significant changes like the EU itself, we can do a briefing session to all businesses that are interested in sending their product.
Okay, Victor, I hope that answered your question. Are there any other questions from the audience members? Perfect. We have Dara Hood.
Hello, I'm Dara from Far Performing Social Enterprise of Far Circus and Far Creative Studio. Two parts to my question. On your experiences, Monika, and the payment gateway in Cambodia, our experiences, if you go to farcircus.org/shop, we have been selling online. And this mask, for example, the payment gateway has been ADA as a local bank. There has been a lot of problem when people try to purchase online. Always card decline. ADA doesn't solve the problem. We contested them many times. They say it's our website or the client card, but we investigate nothing of that. So in fact, we have to change from local payment gateway like ADA to an international one because it doesn't really work. The other question I have is on the regulation. It's very difficult to understand the requirements on the receiving country. We have a client who purchased some jewelry made by seed in our boutique. The client purchased lots of the items from other shops, so all the things need to be shipped by DHL together. Then DHL require that the country of Netherlands requires certificate of origin, but we cannot understand what they need in the certificate of origin. At the end, we try to issue a certificate, but it has been rejected by either DHL or Netherlands Custom. So we had to refund back the money to the client with the bank. We have to absorb the bank fee as well. So just a question on the requirement of each country on the item that can be shipped. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Monika, do you want to start with this, and then perhaps DHL, you can respond to the how to find those buyer requirements?
I think unfortunately you're stuck with ABA, because ABA is the only bank that, is this right? Sort of, okay. Is the only bank that I know that provides an international payment gateway for websites in Cambodia. So our two payment gateways, which allow Apple Pay, GPay, Stripe, PayPal, they go to the Singapore bank. They are not transferred here. So hopefully in the future, again, I hope one of the big banks connects with PayPal. I don't know what the problem is. Some regulatory issue with PayPal not being able to send money to here, to an individual or a business. So unfortunately, I think we just have to hope that ABA works out its problems and improves the payment gateway.
With regards to additional requirement from the custom of the market that you are sending to, I highly suggest you to consult with one of our sales executive or account manager in advance to check whether, in terms of documentation for your specific commodity, what are the requirements, so that once you start to ship, there will be a smooth custom clearance process. The challenge that we have had with some of our customers has been the absence of informing in advance, because usually we try to get information for customer before they ship out, so that the clearance process can be better.
If I may add something on the certificate of origin that you were mentioning, this is a certificate that is issued by the Ministry of Commerce. The issue usually is that the exporter, the shipper, doesn't know whether he or she can apply to preferential trade agreements or preferential tariffs. So depending on what your good is, where you are shipping it to, and the volume of the goods, you will have to apply to different certificate of origin. And the certificate of origin are issued by the Ministry of Commerce, so you cannot issue your own certificate. Obviously, you have to come to the Ministry of Commerce with all this information. If you don't have this information, or if it's partial information, it will be rejected either by the MOC or by the shipper or by the customs in the importing country. So the certificate of origin was created because Cambodia can benefit from preferential market access, meaning that some product exported from Cambodia will enter EU or other markets with zero tariffs or zero quota. And the only evidence that is needed to benefit from this is the certificate of origin, but the right certificate of origin. To further complicate the matters, with the new trade agreements like RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership with China, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand and Korea, there will be a new certificate of origin that will create lower tariffs or zero tariffs for new destinations and new products. So it's very important to do your own due diligence before you come to MOC and apply to the certificate of origin.
I just wanted to pick up on your technical issues without boring the audience. In terms of connection, if you think about, you need to think about who's hosting your website, where it's hosted, how it connects to the bank, its banking, its security. There are probably 20 or 30 layers of potential issues between that. So whilst I'm not sticking up for ABA in your particular circumstance, there are many, many factors that go into posting a payment on a website and actually receiving the funds in banking. So, you know, it might be something completely different other than the bank that's actually stopping your payment connection. And then just to add, there are others. Callebaut are also putting up payment gateways. It's not as easy to integrate as ABA. I know that Sapathana Bank are currently working on another payment gateway. I'm sure there will be more as competition opens up. So expect to see more in terms of banking options.
Okay, thank you very much, all panelists. And Dara, I hope that answers that your question. Let's just check. I just had one follow-up question on that, actually. Does DA... Occasionally with these SME export talks, we worry that we are giving information overload, making the process seem more complicated. But what we did find was that often, you know, just reach out to the service provider and they provide this information for free. I just wanted to ask, for destination requirements, if somebody was just to send if a Cambodian SME was to ask a direct inquiry to DHL, do you provide this information for free in a form of business development?
Yes, you can consult with me for free.
Okay, perfect. That was the follow-up question. And really, again, that is one of the main lessons we've learned from this. If you want to if you want to know what certificate you need to get into your market, speak to the certifying body. They have an active incentive to give you this information. If you want to know which logistics provider to go for, just speak to the logistics company. This is really what we found is the simplest ways for SMEs to get to know this information, as opposed to sometimes getting overloaded with the information we can provide on talks like this. We can give the overview, but the service providers themselves obviously know the nitty-gritty. So on that note, are there any more questions from the audience members? Yes, we do, from Brian.
Yes, this is for Monika. I'm Brian. I write for Cambodian Investor Review. It's a business publication. I'm just curious in general about the regulatory framework, how you find it here. There's a new VAT coming into effect in April. I don't know if how you, if you're in the process of registering with as an e-commerce company in the ministry. I don't know if any companies have registered yet. But yeah, just in general, how you find it, and if this upcoming deadline in April will affect you with the VAT. And maybe lastly, what bottlenecks are the most important for you to try to just power through in this in Cambodia's specific environment for e-commerce.
Are you going to quote me in your story? Can I check it later?
We can talk after.
We can. Yeah, we have looked at this new VAT. We've been to a webinar about it. We've even contacted our contacts at the GDT about it, and they don't understand how it's going to be, and they didn't understand the e-commerce process VAT either. They told us it had to be submitted separately from the VAT we currently submit. So it seems like everyone's very confused about the new. Maybe there's people in this room who aren't confused. I'd love to talk to you about it. In general, like as a small business, we find it very hard to do compliance. Accounting, like I've gone gray. It's because of the accounting. Look at him. Look at all of it. It's bad. If you want to keep your hair, don't do business in Cambodia. No, it's really, really complicated. Because my dream is to scale to the point where we hire one of the big 4 companies and they do it for us, and I never have to look at the nitty-gritty details of withholding tax or VAT ever again. That's my dream. But as a small business owner, I have to know. And yeah, it's hard, it's confusing, we make mistakes, we get fined, we learn new things every day. We're constantly surprised by the loop-de-loops that are there. Happy to talk to you in more detail and off the record and on the record as well.
Maybe I could contribute a bit. I hope it's off record because this is, the perspective from the MOC and the GDT regarding the e-commerce, and the VAT on e-commerce actually doesn't really align, because under the e-commerce regulation or under the e-commerce law itself actually require all the business that provide selling services or selling the product within Cambodia or outside Cambodia or from outside or to inside Cambodia, all require license. that's that. And actually, the purpose for the VAT on e-commerce is actually a bit different, because the purpose is actually the GDT try to collect VAT on the end user that using the services or products from the abroad. But because, like for example, I buy from ASUS or I buy product from Zara that doesn't have a shop in Cambodia, but I don't pay any tax, right? So the purpose of that VAT actually try to impose on those companies that offer from offshore in order to come to GDT to register that and to collect the tax on behalf of the government and then pay those tax back to the GDT. That's the purpose of the VAT on the e-commerce.
Just a general comment on the evolution of the regulations in Cambodia. Cambodia is party to a number of international agreements, ASEAN, RCEP, WTO, etc. These organizations set rules, regulations, standards for different sectors, including e-commerce. So most of the new regulations that we are seeing in Cambodia, from the e-commerce law, from the VAT, from cross-border payment, etc., are actually, I would say, imposed on Cambodia. Cambodia has some transition period to adjust. But all the regulation in place in, say, Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines on e-commerce, especially for cross-border e-commerce, are going to come to Cambodia in the next years. So it's better to be prepared, to be proactive than reactive. And the information is available. If not on the MOC website, maybe the Arise Plus, maybe EuroCham or elsewhere. But you also need to do your own due diligence to make sure that you are going to comply with the laws and regulations in place, but also with what's coming. It's very important to be proactive in that matter. Thank you.
I'm going to say this gets a little more interesting still, in the fact that if you think about technology, what's really interesting is I'm a UK resident, I have a UK passport, but I live in Cambodia. But my website is hosted in Singapore, and my customers come from the US, and they generally will pay by Stripe credit card, which is available in 139 different countries. Where do I pay tax? So it's not always that straightforward. But what's also really interesting is there are other changes going on in other countries. So we think about Europe and previously the UK, though I'm not really sure where that stands. But you think about GDPR, protection of personal data. Even though we're in Cambodia, we still have to comply with European law if we're dealing with Europeans. And Sven said, I think this will change. So California implemented CCTA, I think it is something like that. Again, it's for protection of individuals and individuals' data. And I anticipate from a technology and marketing perspective that will definitely flow to other countries very soon.
Okay, thank you very much, all panelists again. And Brian, I hope that gave you some good information. And of course, this is a public event, so be kind to our panelists if you are using their quotes in your article. Are there any more? If there are any more questions on the audience, I'll give just a few minutes for people to think of them. I do have one question that I'll address potentially to Chris and Sven at first. And that question is, if you are a Cambodian SME that already has quite a well-functioning website that is selling to a domestic audience, what are the practical steps you must take to then get that to be set, to adapt your website, adapt whichever platform you're using to then be able to sell to a neighboring ASEAN member state? I guess this is the low-hanging fruit, but I hope. But yeah, just from the experts, what are those real practical steps you can take?
I'm going to thank Monika for this one. So, search engine optimization. Yeah, so essentially getting to the top of Google. It's all very well, you can put all of this in place. You could put the legals in place, you could put the export in place, you could put absolutely everything in place. If your visitor potentially puts something in Google and you're not on the first page, you're done. I've seen so many small businesses put all this effort in, understand the customer, build the website, go through the technology, implement a payment gateway, and they haven't done any work to actually get in front of their potential customers. So search engine optimization. In Cambodia, it's so easy right now to get on the first page of Google, particularly if you write your content in Khmer and people are searching in Khmer. Masses of opportunity. Do it now. If you're thinking about building a website, do your SEO now, and then you'll be on the first page for a while. So much opportunity there. People pay literally, I think the last UK company, I think they spent £20,000 per week in Google Ads to get on the first page. In Cambodia, you could almost do it for free.
Thank you very much. And Sven?
I think I'm going to paraphrase you first. I would say first you download the presentations from these talks, because there's a lot of words and information in there. Second, you take advantage of the experts that we have in Cambodia. You were asking the questions about DHL, but it's true, and go and talk to the people who know. Cambodia being a least developed country, Cambodia had access to a number of donor-funded programs, as I mentioned in the program. Unfortunately, the people who benefit from these programs, they are what I call the usual suspects. It's always the same companies based in Cambodia, based in Phnom Penh, selling stuff that everybody sells. So what would be interesting is to have new companies, startups coming to, for instance, UNDP, and I think Yusei is in the room, Yusei is in the back over there, from UNDP. There is a small, he doesn't like I call it a small grant program. He has a fancy name to call it, but basically it's small grants that can help businesses to move from where they are now selling in Cambodia to selling overseas, for instance. There's, I think, up to $4,000 grants for that. And this is handled by UNDPs. It's not handled by the Ministry of Commerce. So they are basic steps you can take to get started on your online journey. UNDP might say, well, you're not good enough, or you're not registered, but at least you have to try and get access to this information. And the marketplace, I mentioned CambodiaTrade.com marketplace, which is an MOC-owned marketplace. The sole purpose of this marketplace is to get Cambodian SMEs that sell made in Cambodia product to sell them overseas. And it's free onboarding, it's free support. It's not easy, but it's free. So you have to seize the opportunities where they are. Yeah, information through the experts, through the chambers, and then access to donor funding where they are. And they are in UNDP, they are in the Ministry of Commerce and elsewhere.
Perfect. Thank you very, very much. And yeah, great to see those platforms coming on. And yeah, I think for future export talks, you see, like from UNDP, we'll hopefully get you as a speaker to break down that ground. Great to know that that's a facility in operation. So it's actually 11 a.m. and we've already eaten into our networking time. So I'm going to reluctantly close this panel, even though I'm sure there's more questions. What I will say is that if you do have any other questions, in the registration link that you sent, please feel free to email myself, Ratanak, and then we can forward on the questions to the panelists. And what I may do as well is ask if it's possible to share your contact details for the people in the room for direct questions. But yeah, myself, I mean, I would have loved to ask, how do you find a fulfillment service? Training of how do you get online with the Go for EuroCham portal? I think there's so much follow-up work and questions we can do here. Hopefully those will be for another time. For the audience members, I hope you've enjoyed this panel. And this gives me the honor to finally introduce my executive director, Denis Sainte-Marie, to deliver the final closing remarks.
Thank you all, and both on the stage and in the audience. It was, and thank you, Tom, my deputy executive director, but I mean, with all the teams, they are doing a very great job. So it was a pleasure to have you today for this fifth session of a series of 8. We are very pleased to be embarked in this journey with GOPA, and we funded by EU, Horizon Plus project, and implemented by GSE. The today's sessions, of course, cover key areas of interest and engagements for our chamber, the European Chamber of Commerce in Cambodia, ranging from contributing to the digital transformation of the Cambodian economy, promoting Cambodia as a sourcing destination, and encouraging entrepreneurship through initiatives targeting startup and innovative SMEs. I want to thank all the participants for having shared their insight, especially, not especially, but as Sven has referred to 20 years ago, the first time we have met, I think it's a good example. At this time, Sven came for a mission, a regional one, funded by the UN Conference on Trade and Development. And he was talking about quite a very weird and unknown language. He was talking at the time, 20 years ago, about trade policy, trade environment, e-commerce, consumer protections, and early 20s, it was most a humanitarian approach, NGOs, and so on. So he was quite in advance, but we still listen to him, as especially follow the accession of Cambodia to the WTO. We know that it was part of the future. So, I was at the Royal School of Administration. We have a joint project. You were also at the Ministry of Commerce. Some colleagues were in Laos and Bhutan at the time. But it was very strange. But I think we were right to pay attention to you and to Mr. Soksipana and others at the time. What I want to say also is regarding the digital transformation. Now it is a fact. And of course, COVID-19 crisis was a pushing factor here, but worldwide. Our IT digital committee chairman who just shared some figures about the trends in the United States of America, which was already quite in advance on e-commerce, but for them also the COVID-19 crisis was a push factor. So on this front, EuroCham is going also to develop a special relationship with CADT, which is the Cambodia Academy of Digital Technology. We were to visit their campus, and it's part of the new Cambodia, all these new stakeholders with their own funding schemes. There is this academy, there is a skill development fund, there is Khmer Enterprise, there is a new generation of stakeholders. It's no longer necessary UNCTAD, UNDP, but of course we are very pleased to work with them, but we want also to be part of this new partnership with Cambodian-led organizations. Also, I want to take this opportunity to say that there is this series, but there are other initiatives engaged by EuroCham in favor of entrepreneurship, in favor of sourcing from Cambodia, in favor of voicing the recommendation and the concern of the private sectors, both in terms of trade facility, but also in terms of trade policy, on consumer protection. There are a lot of initiatives engaged. So it leads me to my last and final point. I want to say in the audience, for the ones who are already members of EuroCham, to get even more engaged in our advocacy process, we will publish this year our next new white book. Last year we have provided to the Ministry of Economy and Finance a matrix of 50 recommendations to boost the economic recovery post-COVID. It was a closed-door meeting, but the recommendation were developed with our members through our committees. And for the ones who are not yet members, I forgive you, but it's time for you to be in touch with us and to consider to join this vibrant community. Once again, thanks all of you. Many thanks.